"So you say you can't pay your rent," said the cowgirl to the rancher. "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much." The wind moved slow across the high plain that afternoon, dragging dust along the ground like it was tired of the land itself. The ranch house stood alone, weather-beaten, boards gray from years of sun and regret. A single horse was tied to the post out front, its head low, ribs showing through dull hide. The rancher stood on the porch with his hat in both hands, thumbs rubbing the brim raw, eyes fixed on the woman who had come riding up the trail. She did not rush. She never did. Her horse stepped easy, controlled, the kind of animal trained to wait while decisions were made. She swung down from the saddle and let the reins fall loose, boots hitting dirt with a sound that carried more weight than it should have. The cowgirl was younger than the rumors said, but harder too. Her coat was clean, her posture straight, her eyes sharp in a way that suggested she measured men before they spoke. She looked past him first, at the fields, the broken fence, the dry trough. The barn, leaning just enough to admit it, had given up hope. Then she looked at him. He had not slept much. Lost as that to a man. The rent was overdue, and both of them knew it. The silence stretched, not hostile, just honest. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried, then went quiet. Finally she spoke, calm, almost polite, the words landing without anger but without mercy either. "So you say you cannot pay your rent." The rancher swallowed. He did not argue. Men who argue when they are beaten only make it worse. He nodded once. The land had not given enough. The rain had skipped them again. The cattle had thinned. The past year had taken his wife, then his savings, then his pride. He waited for what always came next. The warning. The deadline. The order to leave by sundown. But the cowgirl did not reach for papers. She did not threaten. She studied his face like she was looking for something beneath the dirt and lines. The porch creaked as he shifted his weight. If she wanted the land back, she could have it. He would walk away like so many others. He had already packed what mattered. The rest was just wood and memory. The cowgirl tilted her head slightly, as if listening to a thought only she could hear. The wind lifted the edge of her coat. Somewhere behind her, the horse snorted and settled. Then she said something else, something that did not sound like law or business, something that felt like the beginning of a deal that was not written down anywhere. "Then you will pay another way." The words hung there, quiet, unfinished, heavy. The rancher raised his eyes for the first time. And in that moment, neither of them knew who was about to be tested more. The cowgirl did not explain what she meant right away. She stepped past him onto the porch like the place already belonged to her, not in arrogance, but in quiet certainty. From there, she could see the whole spread, the uneven pasture rolling out to the fence line nearly half a mile away, the creek bed cracked and pale where water used to run, the barn door hanging crooked on one hinge. This was not land that failed a man. This was land that had been bled dry by time and weather. The rancher stayed where he was, hat still in his hands, shoulders squared the way a man stands when he expects a blow but refuses to flinch. Folks in town called him stubborn. Others said broken. Both were partly right. He had come west with hope once, decades ago, and built this place board by board. He had buried his wife under a cottonwood tree out back, measured the grave himself because no one else had come. When the cowgirl finally spoke again, her voice was lower, not softer, just closer to the truth. "You owe 3 months' rent." She said it like a fact carved into stone. He nodded. He had counted it every night, each month like a nail. She continued without looking at him. "If I take this land back today, you leave with what you can carry. That is the law, and everyone would say I was fair." He breathed out slow. That was the ending he knew. But she did not stop there. "If I let you stay, people will say I am weak. They will say I let a man live on borrowed dirt." The rancher finally looked at her then, not pleading, just listening. She turned to face him, eyes level, no cruelty in them, but no comfort either. "So I will not take your money. I will take your word." He frowned slightly. A word did not buy land. It did not buy feed or rain. But she went on. "There is a piece of work I need done. No payment. No witnesses. No one needs to know. You do it right, you stay through the winter. You do it wrong, or you refuse, and you leave before the sun sets. The power in that sentence did not come from threat. It came from the choice being real. He asked what the work was. She shook her head. Not yet. First you tell me something. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see dust on her cuffs and a scar along her knuckle. Why did you not sell the land when the bank came calling? He hesitated, then answered plain. Because it was hers. He meant his wife. The cowgirl watched his face change when he said it. Something passed behind her eyes then, fast and buried. She reached into her coat and took out a small object. Nothing shiny, nothing fine. Just a simple iron key worn smooth by years of use. She placed it on the rail between them. This opens the old supply shed by the creek. You go there at first light tomorrow. You take nothing with you except what you need to work. You do not tell anyone where you are going or what you are doing. If you finish by sundown tomorrow, the rent is settled until spring. He stared at the key. It was heavy for its size, cold, ordinary. He did not ask what was inside the shed. He did not ask why him. He only asked one thing. And if I do it? She met his eyes and answered without pause. Then you will have paid more than money ever could. The wind shifted. Again across the plain. The horse stamped once. The cowgirl stepped back off the porch, mounted up, and rode away without looking behind her. The rancher stayed where he was for a long moment, then slowly reached out and closed his fingers around the key. The rancher did not sleep that night. The key lay on the small table beside his bed, catching moonlight like an eye that refused to close. It was heavier than it should have been, not in weight, but in meaning. He rose before dawn, washed his face in cold water, and saddled his horse while the world was still gray and undecided. The ride to the creek took nearly an hour, the path narrow and worn by seasons of neglect. When he reached the old supply shed, he saw at once why no one came here anymore. The building leaned toward the dry creek bed as if listening for water that no longer spoke. Its boards were split, the roof sagging, the door swollen shut by years of weather. He used the key. The lock opened with a sound that felt final. Inside, the air was thick with dust and old wood. Sunlight cut through cracks in the walls, revealing what the cowgirl had left waiting. There were tools stacked in the corner, shovels and picks worn smooth by many hands, and a length of rope coiled neatly on a peg. But what held his attention was the shape beneath a canvas sheet near the back. He pulled it away slowly. It was a marker. Simple. Wooden. Unpainted. No name. No date. Just a shape meant to stand where something needed to be remembered. His chest tightened. He understood then that this was not work meant to profit anyone. It was meant to be done right or not at all. The ground outside the shed was hard as stone. Digging took hours. His hands blistered. His shoulders burned. The sun climbed high and gave no mercy. He stopped only once to drink, then kept going, measuring the depth by instinct rather than rule. When the hole was ready, he carried the marker with care, setting it straight, packing earth tight around its base. As he worked, he noticed movement along the far ridge. Riders. 3 of them. Men from town who had always watched his place with interest. They stopped at a distance, close enough to see, far enough to avoid being involved. One laughed. Another shook his head. They thought this was punishment. They thought the cowgirl had sent him to be humiliated. The rancher did not look up. He finished his task, brushing dirt from the marker with the sleeve of his shirt. As the sun leaned west, a woman appeared at the edge of the clearing. She was not the cowgirl. She was older, wrapped in a faded shawl, her steps careful. She stopped when she saw him and pressed a hand to her mouth. He recognized her then. She had lived near the creek once, before illness took her husband and the land took the rest. She had buried someone here without ceremony because she had no choice. He stepped back to give her space. She knelt slowly, touching the marker as if it might disappear. Thank you is all she said. He nodded once. By the time he rode back toward his ranch, the riders were gone. The sun was low. Dust followed him like a question. When he reached the porch, the cowgirl was there, standing where she had stood the day before. She did not ask if the work was done. She only looked at his hands, his face, the way he stood. He held out the key. She took it without a word. The deal had begun, but neither of them spoke its name. Morning brought people. News always did. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, riders were already slowing near the fence, leaning in their saddles to look. The rancher felt their eyes before he heard their voices. He worked anyway. He mended a rail that did not need mending, then hauled water to a trough that would not hold it. The cowgirl had said nothing about keeping the work quiet. She had only said do it right. By midday, a wagon rolled in from town, stopping just far enough away to claim innocence. A man climbed down and laughed, loud and careless, telling the others that this was what happened when a renter forgot his place. Another said the cowgirl had finally shown her teeth. They spoke like men speak when they believe a story belongs to them. The rancher kept his head down. He did not answer. Silence had always been his last possession. The cowgirl arrived when the heat was highest. She did not ride fast. She never did. Her horse stepped through the dust as if it owned it. Conversation thinned when she dismounted. She looked at the men first, then at the work, then at him. She asked nothing. She only waited. One of the men stepped forward, smiling too wide, telling her that everyone in town was talking about her new way of collecting rent. He said it sounded like charity. Another said it sounded like humiliation. The cowgirl listened without interrupting. Then she turned to the rancher. Are you finished? He said yes. His voice did not carry. She walked the fence line, checked the trough, glanced toward the creek. She did not comment. When she came back, she reached into her coat and took out a folded paper. The men leaned in. The rancher did not. She held the paper up where everyone could see. This is the notice of removal. The words fell flat. The men smiled. The rancher felt the familiar hollow open in his chest. She paused, then tore the paper in half. Slowly. The sound was small, but it cut the air. This is not eviction day, she said. This is work day. The men protested. One said the law did not work that way. Another said she was making a fool of herself. She looked at them calmly. The law allows a landowner to forgive a debt. It allows silence too. She turned back to the rancher. The work you did was seen. That is enough. One of the men spat in the dirt and said he would remember this. She nodded once. Remembering is free. They left after that, laughter thinner than before. When the dust settled, the rancher stood alone with her by the porch. He waited for the other part. There was always another part. She reached into her saddlebag and took out a small pouch. Inside was a coin, old and worn, stamped nearly smooth. She placed it in his hand. This is your receipt, she said. He stared at it. One coin could not pay 3 months' rent. She closed his fingers around it. It is not money. It is proof that a man kept his word when no one was watching. He tried to give it back. She shook her head. Keep it. You will need to remember this day. She mounted her horse. As she rode away, the rancher stood on the porch with the coin warming in his palm, realizing that whatever this deal truly was, it was no longer about land. The days that followed moved with a different weight. Word spread without names attached, the way it always did, carried on glances and pauses rather than sentences. People passed the ranch slower now. Some tipped their hats. Others looked away. The rancher kept working. He fixed what could be fixed. He let the rest stand honest in its wear. The coin stayed in his pocket, wrapped in cloth, not as payment, but as reminder. Each morning he rose before light, and each evening he returned before dark, never asking when the cowgirl would come again. She did not give instructions. She did not check his work. That was the hardest part. One afternoon a boy from town rode up, no older than early teens, leading a thin mare with a cracked hoof. The boy said his father had sent him, that the horse would not make another week without care, and that the farrier had left. The rancher looked at the hoof and then at the boy. He could have turned him away. He had enough to worry about. Instead, he took the horse and worked until dusk, shaping and setting with hands that remembered older days. When the boy offered thanks, the rancher only nodded. The next morning a woman came with a sack of seed, saying she heard he knew how to read land better than most. He walked her field with her, saying little, pointing once where water used to run. He did not charge. He did not keep count. By the end of the week, there were more visits. Small ones. Quiet ones. Always when no one else was watching. The rancher began to understand the shape of the deal. It was not about one task finished by sundown. It was about what followed when no one was there to measure it. Late one evening, he found a fence post broken near the creek, knocked loose by runoff and neglect. It did not belong to him. It marked land that was not his responsibility. He stood there a long moment, thinking of the easy choice. He could leave it. No one would blame him. He went back for tools anyway. He worked until his hands shook and the sky turned black. When he finished, he sat in the dirt and listened to the night settle. He thought of his wife then, the way she believed a person was only ever as rich as what they were willing to give away unseen. The following day, the cowgirl returned. She watched from her saddle as he finished hauling water. She did not dismount right away. She studied the place, not for improvement, but for intention. Finally, she rode closer. You are doing more than was asked, she said. He shrugged. The work needed doing. She looked at him for a long moment. There was a question there she did not voice. She turned her horse toward the creek. I saw the fence, she said. He waited for accusation. It did not come. She nodded once. Some men stop when the deal ends. Others only begin. She reached into her saddlebag and took out nothing. No paper. No coin. That was when he realized the danger. The deal was no longer about keeping land. It was about keeping himself. And tomorrow would offer a chance to choose wrong without anyone knowing. The next morning came colder than the ones before it. A thin fog sat low along the creek and refused to lift, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The rancher woke with a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with age or weather. He found the cowgirl already there, standing near the cottonwood tree behind the house. She was not mounted. Her horse was tied off a short distance away, head down, patient. The cowgirl looked smaller somehow without the saddle beneath her, like a person stripped of armor. She did not turn when he approached. You did not need to do all that work, she said, her voice quiet, steady. He stopped a few steps behind her. The work needed doing, he answered. She nodded once. That is what my father used to say. The words hung between them. He had never heard her mention family before. She bent and brushed dirt from the ground with her hand, exposing a faint outline where something had once been marked and then removed. Years ago this land belonged to a man who rented it, she said. He fell behind. Just like you. The rancher said nothing. She continued. The owner offered him a deal. Not money. Labor. Silence. Dignity traded for time. The man agreed. He worked until his hands split. He did not complain. He believed if he did enough it would balance the scales. The cowgirl straightened then and faced him. It never did. When the season ended, the owner took the land anyway. Said the work was never part of the contract. The man left with nothing. He never came back. The rancher felt something shift inside him. You were there, he said. She shook her head. I was too young. But I remember the look on his face when he realized what the deal really was. She met his eyes then. That man was my father. The fog moved slowly around them. The rancher did not speak. There was nothing that would make it smaller. She took a breath. When I bought this land back, I promised myself I would never become that owner. Never test a man with a lie. Never confuse power with worth. But when you stood on that porch and said nothing, I felt the old anger rise. I wanted to know if there were still men who chose right when the terms were not written. She gestured toward the fields. You showed me. He looked down at his hands. He had not known there was a question being asked. She reached into her coat and took out a folded deed. Not a notice. Not a threat. A deed. She did not hand it to him yet. This land is paid for, she said. There is no debt on it except the kind we carry ourselves. I came today to decide what to do with it. She studied him closely. Today you could have taken advantage. You could have charged. You could have turned people away. No one would have blamed you. He shook his head slowly. He thought of the fence post, of the horse, of the seed sack. He thought of his wife. I would have known, he said. The cowgirl nodded. That was the answer. She held out the deed then, not as a gift, but as a truth placed between them. Tomorrow, she said, everything changes. For both of us. The night before the decision arrived with a visitor. A wagon came late, wheels soft on dirt, stopping just beyond the yard where shadows could hide intent. The rancher heard it before. He saw it and knew the sound did not belong to anyone who came for help. A man climbed down and waited, hands open, smile practiced. He spoke of timber rights along the creek, of a buyer passing through who paid quick and asked no questions. He said the deed the cowgirl carried would make the sale simple if the rancher signed first and let the paperwork catch up later. No one would know. The land would still be his by morning, and the winter would be easier. The man said this like advice offered between friends. The rancher listened and felt the weight of the choice settle where his ribs met breath. He thought of the marker by the creek and the fence post set straight in the dark. He thought of the people who came quietly and left lighter than they arrived. He thought of the deed folded in the cowgirl pocket and the promise she had not spoken out loud. The man waited and let the silence work. He added that others would take the offer if he did not. He said opportunity did not knock twice. The rancher asked a single question. Who would be hurt? The man laughed and said hurt was a word for people who hesitated. The rancher looked past him to the fields and the barn and the cottonwood. He saw his wife there as she had been in the early years, hands on hips, smiling when the wind shifted right. He felt the coin in his pocket warm against his palm. He said no. The man pressed once more, softer now, reminding him of cold nights and empty shelves and the chance to be done with struggle. The rancher shook his head. He said some prices do not show up on a ledger. The man left without anger and without farewell. The wagon rolled away and took the easy path with it. The rancher stood alone until the sounds faded and the night reclaimed its shape. At first light he saddled his horse and rode to the creek. He walked the fence line and checked the marker and made a small repair where water had undercut soil. He did not do this for anyone watching. There was no one there. When he returned, the cowgirl was waiting by the porch. She did not ask about the night. She looked at his eyes and saw the answer anyway. She nodded once. There it is, she said. He handed her the deed without ceremony. She unfolded it and then folded it again without reading. You could have chosen easier, she said. He answered that easy does not keep long. The wind moved across the plain and carried away the last of the fog. The choice had been made where no one could applaud it. That was the point. The morning she chose to finish it came without ceremony. No riders gathered. No papers were spread across the porch. The rancher was splitting kindling when he heard her horse stop at the gate. He did not rush. He set the wood down and wiped his hands on his trousers before turning. She stood there a moment longer than usual, as if giving the place time to speak first. The air was clear and cold, and the fields held a promise they had not held in years. She dismounted and walked toward him carrying only a folded envelope. There was no saddlebag weight this time. No watchers hiding at the fence. She handed him the envelope and waited. He opened it carefully. Inside was the deed, clean and final, his name written steady and true. There were no conditions listed. No deadlines. No fine print. He looked up, unsure what was being asked now. She shook her head. Nothing more, she said. The deal is done. He searched her face for the test and found none. She went on. I told myself I would never own land by breaking a man. I also told myself I would never give it away to someone who did not understand what it costs to keep. She glanced toward the creek and the marker and the fence line set straight. You showed me the difference. He closed the envelope slowly. The weight of it was lighter than the key had been, lighter than the coin, but heavier than anything he had held in years. He asked what she would do now. She smiled, not wide, just enough to change the air. I will leave this place knowing it is held by someone who will not sell it to the first voice that whispers easy. She turned to go and then stopped. One more thing. She reached into her pocket and took out the old coin he had carried since. The first day, she placed it on the rail where the key had once rested. You no longer need this, she said. Keep it here. Let it remind the next person that worth is not measured when eyes are watching. He nodded. She mounted and rode away without looking back. The rancher stood on the porch alone with the envelope in his hands and the coin warming in the sun. The land was quiet. Not empty. Quiet. He felt no urge to shout or to run into town. He went back to his work and finished splitting the wood. When he stacked it, he noticed the grain ran clean. The day moved on as days always did. But something had shifted that could not be taken back. The rent was paid without money. The deal was settled without words. And the land rested easier because of it. The land changed quietly after that. Not in ways that drew crowds or filled ledgers, but in the way mornings arrived with less weight and evenings stayed a little longer. The rancher rose each day and worked the ground that was now his without ceremony. He did not tell anyone about the deed. He did not frame it or carry it into town. It stayed folded in a drawer beside the bed, where important things lived without needing to be seen. People still came, though now they came openly. Some asked for help. Some brought help. The rancher gave what he could and refused what felt wrong. He charged fair when charging mattered and gave freely when it did not. The coin remained on the rail by the porch, dull and ordinary, catching the sun at different hours. Travelers sometimes noticed it and asked. He never explained. The marker by the creek stood straight through the seasons. Grass grew around it. No name appeared. It did not need one. The cowgirl did not return. Word said she rode south, and then farther, buying back small pieces of land others had lost and selling them again to people who worked them with care. Some called her foolish. Others called her dangerous. She did not answer either. On one clear evening the rancher sat on the porch and watched the light leave the fields. He thought of the night the wagon came and the choice that had asked nothing and taken everything. He understood then that the deal had not been about land or rent or even justice. It had been about seeing who a person became when no one kept score. The wind moved across the plain and carried the sound of the creek running again after a late rain. The rancher listened and smiled without showing it. He stood and walked to the rail and touched the coin once before turning back inside. Somewhere down the road a rider passed without stopping. The world kept going. It always did. But out here justice did not arrive with guns or papers or raised voices. It arrived quietly, stayed briefly, and left behind something solid enough to stand on. The rancher closed the door for the night and let the darkness settle. Tomorrow would come, and when it did, the land would still be there, held by a man who had already paid the only rent that mattered. This dramatic narrative brings listeners into a quiet corner of the American frontier where dignity matters more than money and justice arrives without violence. Set against open plains and weathered ranch land, this story follows a struggling rancher and a determined cowgirl bound by an unusual deal that tests character instead of wealth. Through patient silence and moral choice, the tale shows how real strength is proven when no one is watching. Perfect for fans of Western stories, this audio journey focuses on honor, accountability, and the unseen cost of easy choices. As one of those timeless Western stories, it captures the slow tension of frontier life, where every decision carries weight and every action leaves a mark on the land. Listeners who appreciate Western stories rooted in human values rather than gunfire will find this story deeply satisfying. The voiceover style, pacing, and imagery are crafted for immersive listening, making it ideal for long-form storytelling. Among modern Western stories, this piece stands out for its quiet power and emotional payoff, reminding us that the truest form of justice often comes through compassion, restraint, and personal integrity. If you are looking for Western stories that linger after the final word, this is a story worth hearing.